Welcome to Sky Notes. In this episode, we get into secondary progressions, the technique that shows what's building beneath the surface of your life. And then we put it to work on a real example, Timothée Chalamet's spectacularly timed CNN interview, and exactly what an astrologer might have told him to save him from himself. So join us while we check our Sky Notes.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Sky Notes. Today, we're going to share with you techniques that will help you kind of get grounded a little deeper than a natal chart or transits. And they're called progressions. And then we're going to talk about the benefit of having an astrologer through an example, a recent example of someone who we think didn't have an astrologer. So back to progressions, Tracy has a good explanation for us.
Sure. Yes. So there's different levels of progressions. And I have to admit, I only use what we call secondary progressions.
Same.
And so understanding, I didn't actually know this. So I went digging because I wanted to understand where they came from. So many techniques that, I use both traditional techniques and modern techniques. And I'll be honest, I assumed secondary progressions were a modern development, and not. So secondary progressions are Hellenistic, coming from the Hellenistic place. But one of the resources that I have is a Robert Blaschke book. It's volume 1 of a series that was called Progressions from the Astrology, a Language of Life series is what it was called. And so Blaschke was doing research on going deeper with progressions and not just the secondary progressions. So the step 1, it started as he calls them the thought pattern, which is in what he calls minor progressions.
Mm-hmm.
And he says that before anything happens in your life, it starts as a mental impression, ideas, beliefs, inner narratives, subtle shifts in perception. And so you're not doing anything yet at this point. It's just something that's forming. It's at the seed stage. And then this next step is in the tertiary progressions. Then it becomes a feeling. That mental pattern drops into the emotional body. Now you start to feel it. Desire, frustration, excitement, fear, and longing. And you still might not act yet, but now it's in the emotional, it's got an emotional charge.
Mm-hmm.
And he calls this, or the interpretation is, this is the getting real stage of our, the things that we're going to move forward into. Then it shows up in real life. And this is the secondary progression phase. Finally, it's moving into the thing is moving into the physical level and into our lived experience. Actions you take, choices you make, things happen in your body, and events or experiences start to show the manifestation. So this is the manifest stage. The key idea is that the part that actually matters is showing up in the secondary progression. Nothing shows up out of nowhere, right? So the secondary progression, the other two are leading into the secondary progression. And so what you see in the secondary progressions, the real life expression. So it started earlier as a feeling and then turned into a thought. And then by the time something is happening, this is now the secondary progression. Now, how you measure them are, and I'm actually going to move my notes out of the way so that we can look at the next screen. So how we look at progressions is, this is a page out of an ephemeris. This is from Llewellyn. And so say somebody is born on March 1st. So minor progressions, which are the quickest, is measured from the 1 lunar month. So that would be, if you're born on March 1st, it would be 28 days, 27 and a half to 28 days. In here would represent a year of life. Okay.
Yeah.
And the tertiary ones is 1 day from birth. So if you're, born here on the 1st, 1 day is representing a month. Okay.
Yeah.
So each day is a month of your life. And then secondary progression, as we know, because you and I both work with secondary progressions, 1 day represents a year in the life, right? So if you're born on the 1st, then this is year 1 and 2, year 2, year 3, and so on and so forth.
That's right.
And so this sounds, I mean, when I learned it, I'm like, this seems obscure and random as a
Right.
tool, right? So
Right.
that's why I assumed it was modern.
Mhm.
But it's not.
What we're measuring with each one is either a year or month of life.
Right. And so the faster, because it's like one day is a year and that
Yes.
is so slow,
Yeah.
right? You're likely not going to see really big changes. The moon, it's about a month per day, right? Is that how it kind of plays out in
I
real
think so.
time?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
It's
like that.
about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you're following the month is like a degree, it's moving a degree per month. And so you can follow it. It takes 28 years approximately to get all the way around the chart. And that we call that the progressed moon, right?
Mhm.
And so it's the thing that's going to be moving the fastest. And we measure it against the natal chart, right? So
Right.
what is the progressed moon doing through the natal chart? And so
Exactly.
the house that it's in is going to tell a very important story. The sign that it's going through by progression is going to give you the energy that the moon is going through. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the relationship to the sun in the progressed chart is the progressed phase, right?
Mhm.
But you can also look at it, there's a kind of a secondary way, and I don't know if you do this, but looking at the progressed moon to the natal sun gives another little piece of
Oh,
flavor there.
interesting. Kind of
Mhm,
as a
mhm.
phase relationship or
Yeah, it would be
aspect.
another way to look at the phase. What
Yeah.
I noticed, because often we see like things that are starting up, it'll be a progressed new moon phase,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so if I'll use Darcy and I meeting as an example.
Yeah.
He was in a new moon phase, a progressed new moon phase when we
Mhm.
met. But I wasn't. And but what I was in a progressed new moon phase when I look at the relationship between my natal sun and my progressed moon.
Got it. Got it.
And so that's not as dependable. That natal sun to the progressed moon is not as hard and fast a
Right.
rule as something new is starting, but something new can start. There, it kind of gives an opening, I find,
Oh,
to
yeah.
if you don't have that progressed new moon phase to work from, comparing it to the natal sun can maybe give you a window of new moon energy to work with,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah. Can I repeat back to you some of what I heard to see if I've got
Sure.
it? For me, we learned projection, or sorry, secondary progressions as part of any consultation. And it was for me a way to learn how to move the chart out of a crystallized, frozen in time, undue influence natal chart into what's happening now, which I think always creates more curiosity and creates movement, creates an infinite level of options. And so when I would describe it to clients, or when I do describe it to clients, I think, uh, if I'm remembering correctly, I say, we're going to look at your natal chart. That's what you were born with. We're going to look at the transits. That's what's going on now. And the way I frame it, which I might say differently, is I used to say, or I say, this is what you've done with it. And what I mean is you're in a process that goes on for your entire life. It's profound and gorgeous. Here's where you're at in that process based on your natal chart. And then, yeah, we make these symbolic substitutions. So to get back on what I heard that there's a minor progression that is counting the lunar month. One day equals the lunar month. Is that right?
I
Okay.
believe so. Yeah.
And the month is associated with like a changeable vibe, right? It's associated with both security and thought. And that one was for a thought to drop in your head kind of thing.
Okay, so that's the tertiary one, and that's the emotional level. So the one that's
Okay.
a little bit faster than that
Yeah.
is one lunar month equals a year.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
Perfect.
so that's the first one, that's the minor progression, and that's when the thought drops in. But you and I were talking ahead of time,
Yeah.
and, like, if I understand the progression of how we go from something kind of coming in. It comes into our more of our cellular body, our
Yes.
energetic body first, you
Yes.
know. It's that in
Like ruffled by
Gilbert,
ancestors
in
almost.
Magic.
Yes.
That book that she talks about, I don't remember what it's called, something about making magic real, or I'm not sure.
Say the author again.
Sarah Gilbert.
Yes. I have no idea. I have no idea.
So bad with names and so bad with titles. Anyways, she talks about, the point is, in that book, she talks about how, you know, magic and ideas and creativity are things that sort of plop into the energetic field,
Yes.
right? So people will get those ideas all at the same time.
Yes. Multiple people get them at the same time. Yes, I agree.
So do we act on them or do we not act on them? So to me, this minor progression is when the thing drops into the collective consciousness and we feel it. And then it can kind of move into our head as an idea. So
that's,
don't you think that would be the energy around the minor progression?
I love that. So minor progression, thought form, we measure it, lunar month equals a year. I love that. So that's one piece. And then we talk about how we use it, right? And how we use it, we speak specifically to like sun ingress into another sign.
Okay,
right?
you're skipping a step.
I don't want to do that.
Going so fast. So then there's the tertiary, and then he's talking about it moves into that emotional like resonance piece. Yeah.
And to me, emotional resonance is also security. So you may get like, pops of this is a warning, or this is a guide, or here's information to kind of address what will keep you secure and create an environment for yourself. So if you see, tricky transits or stuff in that, and I will admit, I have to go investigate this because I hadn't thought about these before, but how fascinating. Because ultimately the secondary progressions to me are a way to really ground yourself and really understand what's going to be in your field for 30 years, what's going to be in your field for what's ripening, like you were saying with the new phase, like what are the things that are happening in a way that you can build your life satisfactorily. So these feel like really cool tools, but the one that I love is the secondary progression.
Well, and I just want to say one thing before we move into that, because the thing about what you said, something really beautiful around the tertiary progression, which is that emotional body piece, right? And that security.
Yeah.
This all feeds very cleanly into this idea that I've been playing with about manifestation and how the moon, right? Like as if we look at it from more Andrea Gertz's approach to manifesting our chart, right? This idea that the planets are feeding into our ability to manifest, and so it has to hit that emotional body. The moon is the first point of entry for that.
Yes.
Right. And so we have to get through the emotional piece before we can get into the sun and how we want to manifest it into as to who we are. And then it moves into that mental part. But by progression, we've done, if Blaschke is onto something here, right? It's actually already kind of done that a little bit first, right? In that underneath part of what's brewing inside us through the progressions, right? So we can kind of almost go to those minor progressions, tertiary progressions first, see how these things have played out
100%
before we get to this manifestation natal chart portion of the story.
I mean, I think you can't underestimate the ability to talk about things ripening and to understand that. And to understand that if something's not ripening, it may need protection, time, calm, silence, support. There may be things that we don't realize. And so I love that you're saying if you go into the minor and the tertiary, you start to see the flavors of that. What was the thought that originated it? What is the security issue that could be an obstacle that you can get ahead of? Right. Which is obviously leading. We're going to get to this later, but I love that. And what I will say, speaking personally, recently, I would say like 5 or 6 years ago, my son, which was in Sagittarius when I was born, pretty quickly went into Capricorn. like 15 years, something like that.
Before you go into that, let's put up the go back to having this up so that we can kind of show what we mean, right?
That's cool.
Okay, so
pretend this is December, pretend I was born on March 1st, 2026, like you're talking about.
Right. And so like the date, everything is up here. So we look at where the sun is on March 1st, the sun was at 10 Pisces, right? So by secondary progression, what degree is your sun at, Lillian?
It's at 8.
Okay. So basically the sun is moving a degree a year.
That's right.
It's actually pretty easy to open an ephemeris on your birthday and sort of do the very rough math of this. Right. So for this person on March 1st, at around 19 and a half, 20, that rest sun is going to change signs. And that's really significant.
Sooner than mine. I would
yes. I mean, this is the thing in why like looking at an ephemeris is not going to be perfect, right? Because the sun is moving at different speeds, right? And so it's always an approximation.
Of course.
So for this person in Pisces, I don't know what the solar speed is for this, but it could be sooner. It could be around the same time. Yes, just depending on how fast, right?
So I would look at the 15th day, right? And say, did the sun change sign there? Right? And I'm looking kind of to see like where it slips out of Pisces. So between 19 and 20, let's say I'm this person now, right? I go from being a Pisces, receiving all the Pisces young, to being, I slip into Taurus, right?
From Pisces, you're going to be in Aries.
Aries. I'm so silly. I want to be in Taurus because I'm like that. But
because Pisces would want to skip Aries and go straight to Taurus. There you go.
What a coincidence. But you get what I'm saying. All of a sudden, my vitality is related to something I don't know about necessarily. And then, I'm older than that. So 30 years goes by, 29 and a half, 28, and I move into Taurus, right? And I'm like, oh, I can really spread my wings, and I'm sucking it up and I'm enjoying it. And because I'm an astrologer, I know I get 30 more years of that. You know what I'm saying? And then that way, my Sagittarius sun is not alone. It's evolving, it's developing, it's picking up skills. And then I was sharing with you, for me, it's different. I was born Sagittarius, so mine went into Capricorn. And Capricorn's such a lovely sign of obligation and devotion and delivering and consistency. I felt like I completely bollocksed it. I'm a fire horse girl. All I had to do was like yell at people about what they're doing wrong. And so I was so glad to move into Aquarius, 30 years later. I was so relieved. And then I was sharing with you before we got on here, you told me that my ascendant was moving into Capricorn. And I thought, what a relief, because the ascendant is a great place for Capricorn. I want to be consistent. I want to deliver devotion. I want to have manifestation of that. So that's more like my personal experience of it and where folks can feel where it would hit. So if the sun sign's not telling you everything, if the transits aren't telling you everything, ask for a progression reading, ask for something deeper.
Well, and I've always approached this idea of, what you're putting into a session like this. Progressions to me are how we're evolving as a person. Yes. It's our opportunity to evolve. Not everybody chooses it. Nobody has to, but it is there for us to evolve and grow. And often this is stuff that is happening internally.
Yes.
What can happen, and I've seen this happen, and I don't know about you, the call to evolve, to step into this new part of yourself, if you're not taking it, then maybe events get created that kind of show you how to step into this new phase.
I like what you're saying. And what I hear is the evolution will continue whether you are willing to be a part of it or not. And you may perceive the evolution as something negative if you aren't actively engaged with it. And just a reminder, actively engaged can be a playlist, a song, you writing down a commitment, standing up for yourself. It can be so light and airy. We're not saying you have to do something that is out of your wheelhouse.
Yeah. Well, and I want to step back just a little bit to the moon because it's going so quickly.
Right.
What's interesting is that, we talk about it by transit, and it's the moon every month is running around our chart
Yes.
talking to everybody, and it's one of the reasons why the energy of our natal moon is so ingrained, right?
Right.
Because the moon has been moving so fast, working through our chart, month after month after month. Um, but by progression, it's still going fast, but it's still moving pretty slowly. But by the time we hit our Saturn return, the two things that are happening at the same time is the moon has now been through the entire zodiac. So that is another form of maturation that is matched externally by the Saturn transit represented in the
I love
Saturn
that.
return.
I love that.
And the ease or difficulty or challenge of it is going to be kind of based on how many opportunities we've chosen to take up and
Right.
to face and to move through, right? If there's some things that we chose not to do, but they're important to what the evolution is saying, then we might get forced to finish it before we get to move on. That's sort of how it seems to me and what I've seen.
It's the reason why we can't run away from problems.
Hmm.
It's the reason why we can't just, I don't see it, I don't hear it. But yeah, there's invitations all the time. I don't have a sense through practice yet what it would feel like if I said to you, there are no new thoughts coming in. Does that resonate? Or there are too many new thoughts coming in. Does that resonate? And then we also really still get into hustle culture. So it's really hard to interrupt the desire to be at the end of a process versus endure that it's just an idea or 20 ideas that other people are having too. Just as a side note, Philip Sedgwick has a great approach to creativity that I find really disciplined and grounded. And he says the difficulty with coming up with the work around these new ideas is we don't have a practice that captures the time of our new ideas. So he just opens on his computer Notepad, and there's automatically a date created with the time. And so he also says it's almost impossible to stay focused for 5 minutes. And because of that, it becomes incredibly beneficial if you have opened a notepad to just start typing stuff in and sit with that for 5 minutes. See if you can do it, put on a timer. And then you'll have that seed that you can just put away and not make a big deal of. And then equally difficult is what happens when things move through our emotional body. I mean, you can argue that, this crazy contemporary society is built on the idea that we don't have an emotional body, or that only girls do. And it's like cooties, or it's a weakness, or it's icky. But in point of fact, it's part of our maturation process to endure and tolerate and come through difficult emotional things. And one of the first ones would be, like you're describing, here's this interior process nobody else has access to. It's all yours. Um, how do you go through that when you receive it in your emotional body? And some of it scares you and some of it excites you, and you start getting jostled by it, and you want to create, I mean, for me, it would be you want to create something that will support this idea. And then what happens when it lands in your physical body? You start doing stuff and you get to it. I mean, it's exciting to think about all of these components. I don't mean to get distracted. If you were asking for me to talk about your progressions, I would look to see what's changing, what's retrograde,
Right.
what.
Yeah, well, and let's use the piece of paper to kind of describe that so that people have a visual to connect what we're about to talk about, right? So this, if we look at this is basically 30 years of somebody's life, right? 30, 31 years of somebody's life. If they were born on the first. So what we're looking for is to see, is anything going to change signs? We know the sun is likely going to change signs in the middle of this, and the moon will continue to change signs quite a bit. The phase will change signs. But for this person around 6 or 7 years old, their Aries is going to change, probably around 6 years old. shortly after birth, actually, within the first couple of years, Mars is changing signs. Jupiter is retrograde at birth, as is Mercury. So you look to see, so when is it going to go direct for them, right? When are these planets going to go direct? And that's something in our example, Mercury is now retrograde for them, and it wasn't at birth.
Oh, so interesting.
Isn't that something? Based on the faux pas, it's so interesting, right?
Yeah. Well, I have Jupiter retrograde. And when I went looking, because I was like, ooh, it's so exciting. When does it go direct? And Jupiter goes direct for me when I'm 121.
Yeah. My Saturn never goes direct in my lifetime.
Oh, well.
It's great at birth for sure. So it's interesting because these outer planet, like from Jupiter outwards, there's a good chance that the condition's not going to change, right? But if you have, like with Jupiter and Saturn specifically, they're going to be ruling houses in your chart.
Right.
And so if they don't go direct or retrograde, there's a steady state that's going to likely happen there. But if they change direction, the what's happening with those areas of your life will likely see quite a shift, right? Just like what we see with the ascendant or the midheaven changing signs.
That's right.
The thing that's fascinating is to see in relation to your natal chart, because so with the sun, we're only really the potential of experiencing signs, we're pretty much maxed out at 4 signs in our lifetime, and that's like 4 is a big span. That's but it could happen. It could. Yeah. You could live a long time and be born really late in a sign. But because of that, you're really here to experience that part of the zodiac from your sun sign right backwards or forwards. And so that's an important thing to think about. What is it about that part of the zodiac that's important for you? And so for me, I'm born Virgo. When I turned 22, my sun changed signs by progression. And I couldn't stay living where I was because now this new version of myself was coming to be. And I felt like I needed, and I mean, this isn't conscious, right? This is in hindsight. I really felt at the time like I needed to be someplace else to evolve into this new version of myself or to experience, right?
Yeah.
At the same time, I have a bunch of Libra in my chart. So it was a different type of when you have a lot of one sign in a chart, to have your sun go into it, you're learning it more from a me perspective. Yes. Would be otherwise, right?
Yeah, how you do it, not how you see it, which is fundamentally different.
Right. And not everybody gets that opportunity because that stellium can be in a sign that the sun's never going to actually get to, right?
Yeah.
Whereas the moon is going to experience it for you. So you are going to experience it on that emotional level, whether you would like to or not.
Or can acknowledge it. A lot of people, they can compartmentalize or, there's nothing wrong with, handle what you can handle. What can you do?
Yeah. And, the thing that I'm curious about with anybody who's not incorporating secondary progressions in a future looking session, there are some progressions that are not conducive to certain things. So I'll give an example. The progressed moon going through the 12th house doesn't really, you shouldn't be looking for attention at that time.
Right.
It can really backfire on you.
Right.
You also don't have the energy to put into bigger things, and so this is where, you look at the different layers that we look at. And some people really are blessed with all of those different things lining up, like, Jupiter and things happening at the 12th, and the moon is up there. The progressed moon is up there too. And it's all there for you to be public and, grow career wise. Not everybody is blessed with all of those layers lining up in that way. So only looking at one and not the other, you could by transit be given all of these opportunities. But knowing the energy of the progressed moon sign phase house placement, you need to kind of know how to go at it from your own personal energy level, what you want people to see, what you want to hold close to you,
Absolutely.
And so, like the example that we're going to look at, an astrologer would have likely given different advice than the life choice that was made. It's the things that are almost always important and things that people are going to go through at some point are that you mentioned already, the progressed sun changing signs is a big one. The progressed moon and phase we've said. Then also the angles changing signs are a big deal because the ascendant is going to be how we want to portray. So people who go out now all of a sudden just totally change their look.
Right.
Progressed ascendant has likely changed in the past couple of years, right? Because it does take us a bit of time, when those things that takes a long time for them to shift.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to describe the progression that I've experienced.
Yeah.
And when things are at that 28, 29 degrees about to change, and especially with the faster things, there's an anxiety around feeling like something's coming, feeling like change is coming. But if you're not aware of what's going on, you don't know why you have that kind of anxiety or anticipation feeling, right? And so that's something that people feel so much better when they know that that's what's underlying their stress, and why sometimes kind of there can be a panic to finish whatever you were supposed to finish.
Right. A
Right?
sense of
Supposed to
urgency.
being self-imposed. The supposed to isn't, we're not telling you were supposed to do anything, but you might feel like you were supposed to be doing something, but you don't know what it is.
Yeah.
And then so the sun and the angles are definitely going to bring that feeling. Maybe Mercury because it moves fast, and maybe Venus because it moves fast. And then definitely with the moon phase changing, you're going to feel a similar sort of like anxiety that something is going to shift. Yeah. And then with the house cusps as well, if it's going to change signs, or if it's sitting at 29 degrees, and if that's a really active part of your chart, there can be that same sort of feeling like in that part of your life, you need to do something, or something is about to change. So those are the things that are most commonly worth paying attention to. And then the direction of those faster moving things too. Because a retrograde Mercury, I've heard a lot of this story is very common when Mercury goes retrograde as a teenager. That all of a sudden, like, people drop out of school becomes difficult, or the opposite. I've seen where somebody in my family had it go direct in grade, I think it was like the 8th or the 9th grade. And they went from an average student to on the dean's list student.
That's marvelous.
Like, all of a sudden, just their ability to focus when the Mercury changed directions is night and day. And the child can't explain it. It just all of a sudden they found the focus that they needed.
I love how you're describing it, because during a consultation, I'm going to talk about what's happening based largely on the transits and your natal chart. And I assume a good 80% of that is going to represent what we have to talk about in whatever amount of time we've given ourselves. And it's going to be substantial. What I feel about secondary progressions, which I use, and other techniques I use, is it puts the foundation underneath. My suspicion is I would dig further into that secondary progression to find out what the message is. So it's a technique that grounds the work that the natal chart does with transits. That's kind of the
I like that. Yeah, I like that. Well, and when I started doing a lecture called Stop Blaming Saturn, and it was born out of a consultation with somebody I know quite well. And so if you're born with your sun around 0, like 29 degrees to 1 degree, right around your Saturn return, your progress sun is going to change signs.
Right.
So you're going to have a phase return, a lunar phase return by progression. Your sun is going to change signs by progression. She also had a 29-degree ascendant. So the ascendant changed signs while she was having her Saturn return.
Yeah.
And it was like a world crashing event, because not only did she have a chart that was quite difficult around Saturn, but she didn't know who she was anymore. Like, it was just like, when I looked at all of the things happening at the same time, it was just like, and to look at just the transits would not have given you the level of distress that they were in at all.
Right. And if somebody comes to you and says, I want to go on vacation, you wouldn't worry about, is the boat going to be okay? right? And so you'd want to look underneath to be like, is there a quality? What is the quality? What's the outcome? What are
Yeah.
you looking to accomplish? So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. So yeah, they are definitely the thing that is happening underneath the surface. That is, it's and to know sort of what's going to shift and change, especially if people are in sort of like big transit times. It's like, let's
Yeah.
find out how much energy you're going to have to put into this and how
Which
you
is why it's so great to talk about this now, because we're in a big transit time.
we are. It's very true,
Yeah.
definitely. All right, so do we want to talk about our victim? So this fellow, Timothée Chalamet,
Mhm.
um, so this was probably just before the week before the Oscars. An
Mhm.
interview that he was doing with Matthew McConaughey surfaced. And this is the quote. I don't want to be working in ballet or opera where it's like, keep this thing alive, even though it's like, no one cares about this anymore. All respect to the ballet and opera people out there. And as he shifted in his chair, offhandedly said, I just lost 14 cents in viewership. And so and now this is happened just before the Academy was going to vote for the Oscars. So, of course, it hit the news in a huge way that the timing couldn't have been worse. And as soon as you hear that, as soon as you hear the timing couldn't be worse,
Yes,
what do
I
you go
want to
do?
pause you there. I want to talk about who this guy is in case people don't know.
Sure.
Timothée Chalamet started acting around 2008, and he went to a high school for the performing arts. So there's video of him performing in all kinds of ways, hip hop, dance, all sorts of things. He's from an artistic family. His mom was a dancer. So he became famous from Call Me By Your Name. And then, currently is in the Dune series that's been revived. And so he's got a film coming out, Dune 3. And this year he's been loud about his potentially Oscar winning film, Marty.
Well,
Marty
because it was his,
Supreme.
isn't this his, like, it's either his fourth or his fifth Oscar nomination?
Nomination. Yeah. So he's
Yeah.
dying for this. And so the movie is about a ping pong superstar, which I don't remember the last time I watched ping pong as a popular social outing, or even TV show. So famous actor, he's currently dating Kylie Jenner. Thank you. And he runs with, Kanye West and all sorts of famous people. So he's super well known. He's a star on the rise. He wants to win an Oscar. And here he goes to this interview where he badmouths two other artistic forms, art and opera.
Yeah. And so it was on the CNN town hall interview with Matthew McConaughey.
There it is,
And
yeah.
it happened in Austin, Texas, is where they do it live. And I just, as soon as I saw it, I thought I got to look at what the astrology of that was.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it was just an offhanded remark. And I think he's a fairly polarizing guy anyways. I feel like nobody doesn't have an opinion, right? It's sort of like you either have a strong dislike or a strong like. He's kind of one of those people. And so the transits, which is what we're going to look at first, were striking, absolutely. So let's talk about this here. So this is the transit on the night of the interview. And I picked the beginning of the episodes just because to get the midheaven would be significant at that point. So by transit, Mercury is in shadow. So it is about to go retrograde in Pisces. And it's sitting very close to his Saturn.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing I think about is he's not long from his Saturn return.
Right.
And as a matter of fact, I looked, and this would have been February 21st, and his Saturn return was the year before. So it hasn't even been quite a year since his Saturn return. So he's right in the beginning of that. And then the Uranus has been going back and forth over his midheaven now, and it'll finally do its last pass right away in a couple weeks. And Uranus going over the midheaven can create shakeups around career, right? But the other thing too that I was thinking is that, so the Mercury retrograde is sitting on his Saturn, and Saturn rules all that Capricorn
There
stuff
you go.
down
Yeah.
there as well. So that's another piece of the puzzle. So
Yeah.
these transits, I mean, just based on this, if you knew the date of this event as his astrologer ahead of time, I personally would have said, wait till Mercury's not retrograde anymore, or do it earlier before Mercury gets anywhere near your Saturn, would have been my personal advice.
And mine was treat this interview like it's AI and go in as a character.
Oh,
And I was
okay.
joking that the character he should choose is somebody who's been sued a lot for opening his big damn mouth. And he needs to go in and keep his mouth shut during this interview. And that
Okay.
giving him something to put all of that creativity on and injecting that little bit of fear might be enough to get that Capricorn oriented the right way.
Yeah. Well, I was obsessed with the Mars Mercury Neptune conjunction.
Yes, I remember you talking about
that's a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
I have Mercury, Uranus, not Mars, thank God. But like, you know, that when Mars is stimulated like that by a planet you can't control, that's problematic. You know, I know for myself.
Yeah.
And the other thing that struck me about all the Capricorn down there was the
Yes.
piece when we talk about status, right?
Well,
And-
yeah. Which you know, and opposed by that Jupiter. I think there was something we were talking about with that Jupiter opposition, right? It exalted in Cancer. So what we're talking about, so his chart has Virgo, right, on the ascendant. So the ascendant is ruled by the Mercury. The Mercury is impacting the Saturn. The Saturn's in Pisces. That's gorgeous. That's creative, but it's in the 7th house. So it's subject to undue influence from others. And so other people could, I think we were saying in the pre-meeting, CNN must have just eaten this up. You know, it's great for them. But for him, there's vulnerability on top of vulnerability, and you want to shield that. And so with all of the active Capricorn digging in under this to this progression, I would recommend that he start protecting himself. You know?
Well, and the other thing that struck me were the things at zero, because there's an uncontrollability to 0 degrees, you know, so you have the moon is at 0 and Saturn and Neptune are both at 0.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's that kind of uncontrollable energy to 0 degrees that you don't quite know right away how it's going to turn out.
Yeah.
And so what was wild about when it hit my consciousness and it became kind of viral was when Mercury was retrograde and it came back to this point at 21 degrees of the original interview. So, I mean, when we talk about Mercury retrograde and how, you know, you hear, I've heard so many people, oh God, Mercury retrograde, that's all astrologers talk about, blah, blah, blah. Nothing big happens. It's like, here's a very good example. Very good example of when to pay attention to Mercury retrograde, right? Because he's going to be my poster boy for Mercury retrograde from now on.
And when did we say, did it go retrograde around 2008? I can't remember.
Oh, I don't remember what year that was in.
We were looking at that because that would give you more information, but this is plenty, right?
Oh, right.
All you have to see is direct in the natal chart, retrograde in the current chart, and you can tell somebody big changes have come. How have you reconciled that?
Right. And the other thing that's neat, that's really cool about this chart is that, so the stuff on the outside is the transits, but it's also basically the chart for the event of the show, right?
Right.
And you've got Jupiter in Cancer, which is retrograde. So it's not helpful, even though it's in great shape and in a great place. And then it's trine Venus. So you just think, oh, that's beautiful. Just as a tertiary look at a chart, it's like, oh, do it then because you've got that beautiful trine. Well, that only benefits CNN.
Right.
Because it's not actually doing anything with his chart.
Right.
So yes, viral moment for CNN. People are like, oh, maybe that town hall show is worth watching. Right. Not great for the guy whose natal chart is sitting in the middle of all this mess, you know? And the fact that midheavens are connected like that, you see, there's a polarizing effect of that Uranus sitting in between the two, which is wild.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So interesting.
Yeah. So now, of course, he has not won the Oscar because this was before. He did lose. And not only did he lose, but he was roasted all night because of this event.
Wasn't there even a ballerina on stage during Sinners?
Last minute, she chose to come on and do after 3 months after a hip surgery, come out and
Mr.
dance
Copeland,
ballet
yeah.
to
First
stay.
black principal dancer. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. But I mean, he was roasted all night.
Yeah.
Like he just the pictures of his poor face. I mean, I did have finally a little bit of sympathy, just because he was.
I have tremendous empathy having also that Saturn in Pisces. That's
Yeah.
such a loopy, outer worldly Saturn. And that's not necessarily the best Saturn in a day-to-day.
The Saturn return, I think, sometimes gets perceived as this event that's going to happen when it happens, and then that's it.
Oh,
But
right.
often the event isn't at the Saturn return. What happens is the transit happens, and then that first few 2.5 years is negotiating this new level of maturity.
Yes.
So anything can happen in that first 2.5 years
Yes.
till you've gotten your new Saturn legs grown
Yes,
up.
I love that. I love that.
And so here you go. This is a year later, and he's still learning. And for a guy with this much Capricorn in his chart and Saturn ruling Capricorn, his lessons are going to be harsh. If he's living in that shadow of Capricorn, there's some serious maturing that needs to happen or is expected, right? And so he's going to get hard if he doesn't want to pick up what they're putting down.
Right. It's so fascinating always, right?
So these are the things that struck me about this secondary progression chart. So this is for the night of the interview. And it hasn't, again, we talked about how slow they move. So it hasn't changed very much at all. But I didn't circle it, but over here, he's got Saturn. So his progressed Saturn has only moved like 2.5 degrees.
Wow.
But look at it. That Saturn on that day is partile and applying, and then it would have retrograded on the day that it really hit the news. It would have retrograded back to that exact same place.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. So his progressed midheaven is at 29 degrees Gemini, and his progressed ascendant are at 29 Virgo. So they're Mercury ruled, right? So this is his reputation and how he's seen by people. And he screwed with Mercury retrograde.
Yeah.
Right. And then also by progression, his Jupiter has gone into Capricorn and is sitting exactly on his sun. And Jupiter rules that Saturn and Saturn rules that sun. So that is like, grow up. You do not get the rewards unless you're a responsible adult. That's what Jupiter in Capricorn is going to say.
Yeah.
And so where did I write the date down? So both the progressed midheaven and ascendant are going to change signs January 2027. So in less than a year, those are changing signs. And they're changing signs on the same damn day. Like, that's wild. Most of us get a bit of grace and a little bit of time in between. That is not what is going to happen for him at all.
So for a chart like this, I would advise a lot of pre-work, a lot of blue sky, where do you want to be, what it is that you want, really clarifying that, really getting inward with that. And I don't know if you'd be interested, because a Capricorn would be super impatient with that.
What's really interesting, though, is in what came to me when I saw the 29 degrees, especially on the midheaven, right? Is I understood where that need for the Oscar came from. Right? That midheaven's about to change signs. I have to do this thing now before that shift happens. Right? Like, even him, he probably couldn't put into words why he felt that so strongly. Right? He kept saying it publicly over and over, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, that's why, because there's a huge shift coming. And so I'd be really curious to know, like, just based on this event and looking at the astrology, I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't go hide. Just take himself out for a while. right? And come back reinvented.
It's funny you say that. That reminds me of a human design pattern. There's a, I can't remember the, pardon me, the name of it, but it is exactly that, where you live wild and free in your 20s. And then you shut that down until your 50s, where you go mull all of what you've taken in. And then you come out in your 50s and you share what it is that you've learned.
Right.
So it's interesting.
Yeah, very much so. Well, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him try on a few different personas, right?
Yeah.
For about 3 years. It's going to get weird. I would guess.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right? Yeah. Especially with Uranus up there at the top, right? By transit. Uranus is going to be up in his 10th house for a long time.
And I can't remember if in his natal chart, if the Uranus has slipped into Aquarius. It hasn't. It's still in Capricorn, right?
I believe so, yeah.
So it just got run over by Pluto, is what I'm trying to get to. Pluto is now in Aquarius. And so he had all of that, which I found for Capricorns to be almost energizing.
Uranus has gone into Aquarius by progression.
Right.
The other thing that's interesting, though, is that Pluto is going to go over his Venus by transit in a few years. So in the middle of all that, him trying to figure out who he is, right, and who he wants to put out into the world, Pluto is going to sit on his Venus and go, what's really important to you? Like, what do you actually value? And it's going to knock all the things out that aren't important to him becoming who he's meant to be.
I got married when Pluto was on my Venus.
That's beautiful. Now at the time I'd have been like, are you sure this is what you want to get yourself into?
Oh my gosh. Tell me about that.
But no, I mean, just as someone who just had Pluto opposing Venus, and then a very good friend has a completely opposite Venus. So we were going through the conjunction and the opposition at the same time.
So
and both completely intense and both very similar. The difference is that in the opposition, there was some objectivity and really being clearly able to see what I was supposed to be looking at.
Yeah.
It's much more muddied when it's the conjunction, you know?
It's
yeah.
It's clear in one way, you know, it's like being a boner or whatever, a girl boner. You know what I'm saying? It's very focused. But it is definitely not objective. Sorry, I dropped my phone. It's not objective at all. And so you really, you know, what I chose to do at that time, I mean, I was lucky enough in that relationship that I had already been through a really serious relationship and lost it. And there's something when you go through that, which some astrologers will associate with the nodes in the first and seventh houses, that you lose the first love and that's part of the journey. And there was something so serious about that where I just thought, my gosh, if I have another relationship that serious, I really hope we're kind to each other from the beginning to the end. I really hope we stay objective, and I really hope we support the best in each other. You know what I mean? And so thank goodness that's what the drumbeat was around the whole, hey, baby, hey, I want you.
Yeah.
Well, the Venus in Sagittarius, if you couldn't tell.
Beautiful. Well, and so one of the things that the Pluto to Venus transit is trying to get you to do is get rid of the stuff that you've buried that doesn't need to be there anymore.
Yeah.
You know, things that you might be holding on to that for me, it was things I didn't even realize were still in there. You know, kind of took me by surprise, and they needed to be mourned a little bit.
Yeah.
And so for him, like, he won't be given a choice as to whether he's faced with the things that he needs to let go of that just aren't valuable to who he is. You know, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, but it'll be a lot on a personal level. It's going to be a lot, because that's when we see things by secondary progression and transit happening at the same time like that. That's a full human transformation that's happening all at one time. And so it can be a lot of energy expenditure and pretty emotional.
Yeah, we cheer you on, Mr. Chalamet. Big stuff coming.
Who knows? But the reason this episode is called, you should have talked to an astrologer. You should have talked to an astrologer. Anyways, this might be the push that he needs to make whatever life change he needs to make. Secondary progression is one of my very favorite tools. And
Me
I'm
too.
happy to hear you too.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, me too. Yeah, we don't usually check our bona fides. So it's such a blessing that we both just love him, love him, love him. And
Yeah.
also I have to say about Robert Blaschke, you know, I really had the privilege of working in the bookstore as a volunteer for years. And early on, Robert Blaschke, I was just a huge fan. He was a delicious Virgo astrologer and
Beautiful.
has an amazing body of work. So
Oh, beautiful. Yeah. I'm excited to revisit this. The first time I tried to go through that book, I was much too fresh an astrologer to understand the level of esoteric
yeah.
discussion that he was engaging in the book. But now that I've worked with progressions for so long and really sort of understood the energy behind them or underneath them, I'm excited to explore some of the stuff that he was working on. So I'm glad we talked about this today for sure.
Me too.
All
Well,
right.
thanks for another great conversation.
Thanks, Lillian. Talk soon.